Right now, someone somewhere is getting under your skin. Maybe it's your boss who takes credit for your work, your partner who never listens, or that person on social media who just has to argue with everything you post. And here's what's happening in your brain at this exact moment. Stress hormones are flooding your system. Your heart rate is spiking and you're giving away your mental peace to someone who probably isn't even thinking about you. But what if I told you that the most powerful people in the world have mastered something that you can learn in the next 20 minutes? They figured out how to become completely unbothered by other people's actions. Not because they're cold or emotionless, but because they understand something about human psychology that most people never learn. Today, you're going to discover the exact mental framework that allows you to stay calm when others try to provoke you, maintain your emotional equilibrium when people mistreat you, and actually use difficult people as fuel for your own growth. This isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending things don't bother you. This is about rewiring your brain to respond from a place of strength instead of reacting from a place of weakness. Chapter 1. Why people have so much power over your emotions. The reason people can trigger you so easily isn't because you're weak or overly sensitive. It's because your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect you from threats. But here's the problem. Your primitive brain can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a sarcastic comment from your coworker. Both activate the same ancient survival circuits that kept your ancestors alive. When someone criticizes you, dismisses your ideas, or treats you unfairly, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, immediately sounds the danger signal. Within milliseconds, stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense up, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, goes offline. This is why you can't think clearly when you're triggered. This is why you say things you later regret. This is why you replay conversations in your head for hours afterward. But it gets worse. Every time you react emotionally to someone's behavior, you're actually strengthening these neural pathways. You're training your brain to be more sensitive to triggers, not less. Neuroscientists call this sensitization. The more you practice a response, the more automatic it becomes. So, if you've been getting triggered by the same types of people or situations for years, it's not because you're not trying hard enough to stay calm. It's because you've inadvertently trained your brain to react this way. The most damaging part isn't even the initial trigger. It's what happens next. When you're emotionally hijacked, you make decisions from a place of fear, anger, or hurt. You might lash out and damage relationships. You might withdraw and miss opportunities. You might ruminate for hours, replaying the situation and making yourself miserable. Meanwhile, the person who triggered you has moved on with their day, completely unaware of the mental chaos they've created in your head. This is why emotional triggers are so insidious. They don't just affect you in the moment. They ripple out and contaminate other areas of your life. You might snap at your family because your boss was difficult. You might avoid taking risks because someone once criticized your ideas. You might hold grudges that poison your relationships for years. The person who triggered you gets to live rent-free in your head, influencing your decisions and limiting your potential. Most people think the solution is to avoid difficult people or situations. But that's impossible and ineffective. Difficult people are everywhere, and if you're going to achieve anything meaningful in life, you're going to encounter criticism, rejection, and mistreatment. The real solution is to change your relationship with these triggers. Instead of seeing them as threats to avoid, you need to see them as opportunities to build psychological strength. Think about physical fitness for a moment. Your muscles don't grow when you're comfortable. They grow when they're stressed. When you lift weights, you're actually creating tiny tears in your muscle fibers. It's the process of healing from this stress that makes your muscles stronger. Your emotional resilience works the same way. Every trigger is an opportunity to strengthen your psychological muscles. Every difficult person is a chance to practice emotional regulation. Every challenging situation is training for the bigger challenges that lie ahead. The people who seem naturally unbothered by others aren't born with some special gene that makes them immune to triggers. They've simply learned to reframe their relationship with difficult people and situations. They understand that getting triggered is a choice, not an automatic response. They know that other people's behavior says everything about them and nothing about you. And most importantly, they've trained their brains to respond instead of react. Chapter 2. The hidden cost of being emotionally reactive. Most people have no idea how much their emotional reactivity is costing them. They think getting triggered is just a minor annoyance, a momentary loss of composure that doesn't really matter in the long run. But the truth is far more serious. Emotional reactivity doesn't just steal your peace of mind. It systematically destroys your potential, sabotages your relationships, and keeps you trapped in patterns that prevent you from becoming the person you're capable of being. Let's start with what happens in your brain when you're chronically reactive. Every time you get triggered, your body floods your system with stress hormones. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's literally toxic. Chronic stress shrinks the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and complex thinking. At the same time, it enlarges the amygdala, making you even more sensitive to triggers. So, the more you react emotionally, the less capable you become of thinking clearly and the more likely you are to react emotionally in the future. It's a vicious cycle that gets worse over time, but the cognitive damage is just the beginning. Chronic emotional reactivity wreaks havoc on your physical health. Studies show that people who frequently experience anger, frustration, and stress have higher rates of heart disease, stroke, and immune system dysfunction. They age faster, sleep worse, and die younger. When you let other people trigger you, you're not just giving them power over your emotions. You're giving them power over your physical health and longevity. The career consequences are equally devastating. Emotionally reactive people are passed over for promotions, excluded from important projects, and often labeled as difficult to work with. They burn bridges with colleagues, make impulsive decisions that hurt their reputation, and miss opportunities because they're too busy managing their emotional chaos. Meanwhile, their calmer colleagues advance steadily, not because they're more talented, but because they're more emotionally regulated. In relationships, reactivity is poison. When you're constantly triggered by your partner's behavior, you create an atmosphere of tension and walking on eggshells. Your children learn that emotions are dangerous and unpredictable. Your friends start avoiding you because they never know what's going to set you off. You become the person others have to manage and tiptoe around, which gradually erodes respect and intimacy. Perhaps most tragically, emotional reactivity robs you of your authentic power. When you react to triggers, you're not responding from your highest self. You're responding from your wounds, fears, and unprocessed emotions. You become predictable and easy to manipulate. People learn exactly which buttons to push to get a reaction from you. And whether they do it consciously or not, they end up controlling your emotional state. Think about the most influential people you know. The leaders, innovators, and game changers who actually make things happen in the world. What do they all have in common? They don't let other people's opinions, criticism, or behavior derail them from their mission. They've learned to stay centered and focused regardless of external circumstances. This isn't because they don't care what people think. It's because they understand that their emotional state is their responsibility, not anyone else's. The opportunity cost of reactivity is enormous. Every moment you spend upset about someone else's behavior is a moment you're not spending on your goals, relationships, and personal growth. Every decision you make from a triggered state is likely to be suboptimal. Every relationship you damage through emotional reactivity could have been a source of support, collaboration, or joy. But here's what most people don't realize. The very people who trigger you the most are often your greatest teachers. They're showing you exactly where your emotional weak spots are. They're revealing the beliefs, fears, and insecurities you haven't dealt with yet. They're giving you free therapy by triggering your unresolved issues so you can finally address them. When you learn to see triggers this way, difficult people stop being obstacles and start being opportunities. The good news is that every single aspect of this can be changed. Your brain's neuroplasticity means you can literally rewire your responses to triggers. You can train yourself to stay calm under pressure, think clearly in challenging situations, and respond from wisdom instead of wounds. You can transform your biggest triggers into sources of strength and confidence, but it requires a fundamental shift in how you think about emotions, relationships, and personal responsibility. Chapter 3. The Detachment Mindset, Your Mental Fortress. True emotional freedom doesn't come from controlling external circumstances. It comes from mastering your internal response to those circumstances. This is the essence of the detachment mindset. The understanding that you are not at the mercy of other people's actions, words, or energy. You are the sovereign ruler of your own emotional territory, and no one can enter that space without your permission. Detachment doesn't mean becoming cold, unfailing, or disconnected from life. It's quite the opposite. When you're detached from the need for others to behave a certain way, you become more present, more compassionate, and more genuinely engaged with the world around you. You stop wasting energy trying to control things you can't control and start focusing that energy on the one thing you can control: your response. The detachment mindset is built on a fundamental truth that most people resist. Other people's behavior is about them, not about you. When someone is rude, critical, or dismissive, they're revealing something about their own internal state, their insecurities, fears, unprocessed emotions, or learned patterns. It has nothing to do with your worth, competence, or value as a person. But your ego doesn't want to accept this truth because it's addicted to making everything personal. Think about it this way. If someone is having a bad day and snaps at you, their behavior is a reflection of their emotional regulation skills, not your worthiness of respect. If someone criticizes your work, their criticism reveals their perspective, standards, and communication style, not the ultimate truth about your abilities. If someone tries to manipulate or control you, their behavior shows their level of emotional maturity, not your obligation to comply. The detached mindset allows you to observe other people's behavior with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Instead of thinking, "Why are they doing this to me?" you start thinking, "What's happening inside them that's causing this behavior?" This shift from personalizing to analyzing transforms you from a victim of circumstances into a student of human psychology. Every difficult interaction becomes data about human nature rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Detachment also means releasing your attachment to outcomes you can't control. Most emotional triggers stem from unmet expectations. You expect people to be fair, reasonable, considerate, or appreciative. And when they're not, you get triggered. But expectations are just premeditated resentments. When you detach from the need for others to meet your expectations, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of constantly being disappointed by human behavior. This doesn't mean lowering your standards or accepting mistreatment. It means distinguishing between influence and control. You can influence how people treat you through your boundaries, communication, and actions, but you can't control their choices, reactions, or attitudes. When you accept this distinction, you stop fighting battles you can't win and start focusing on strategies that actually work. The detachment mindset also involves understanding the difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is automatic, emotional, and usually ineffective. It's driven by your triggers and often makes situations worse. Responding is deliberate, thoughtful, and strategic. It comes from your values and goals rather than your wounds and fears. When you're detached, you have the mental space to choose your response instead of being hijacked by your reactions. Practicing detachment requires developing what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. Instead of being lost in your emotions, you learn to observe them from a slight distance. You notice when you're getting triggered without immediately acting on that trigger. You become curious about your own patterns and reactions instead of being enslaved by them. One powerful technique for building detachment is to imagine yourself as a scientist studying human behavior. When someone triggers you, instead of taking it personally, get curious. What patterns do you notice in this person's behavior? What might be driving their actions? What can you learn about conflict, communication, or human nature from this interaction? This intellectual curiosity creates enough emotional distance to prevent triggers from hijacking your rational mind. Another key aspect of detachment is understanding that you don't need others to validate your worth, opinions, or choices. Most triggers occur because we're unconsciously seeking approval or fearing disapproval from others. When you're truly detached, you validate yourself. You know your own value independent of others' opinions. You make decisions based on your own judgment rather than trying to please everyone around you. The detachment mindset ultimately transforms your relationship with all of life's challenges. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, you become the calm observer who can navigate any storm. Instead of being reactive and unpredictable, you become steady and reliable. Instead of giving your power away to anyone who knows how to push your buttons, you maintain sovereignty over your own emotional state. Chapter 4. The Science of Emotional Regulation. Rewiring your responses. Your brain is remarkably plastic. It's constantly rewiring itself based on your experiences, thoughts, and behaviors. This means that every time you react emotionally to a trigger, you're strengthening the neural pathways that make you more likely to react the same way in the future. But it also means you can deliberately rewire these pathways to create new, more empowering responses. Understanding the neuroscience behind emotional regulation gives you the tools to literally reshape your brain. When you encounter a trigger, the information travels first to your amygdala before reaching your prefrontal cortex. The amygdala processes this information in about 12 milliseconds while the prefrontal cortex takes about 24 milliseconds. This means your emotional brain is literally twice as fast as your rational brain. By the time you're consciously aware of a situation, your emotional reaction has already been activated. This is why traditional advice like just stay calm doesn't work. By the time you remember to stay calm, your stress response is already in full swing. But here's the fascinating part. You can train your brain to create a buffer between stimulus and response. This buffer is created through a practice called response flexibility. The ability to pause between a trigger and your reaction. This pause doesn't require superhuman willpower. It requires understanding how your brain works and using specific techniques to work with its natural patterns rather than against them. The first technique is physiological regulation. Your emotional state is intimately connected to your physical state, particularly your breathing and heart rate. When you're triggered, your breathing becomes shallow and your heart rate increases. But you can reverse engineer calm by deliberately controlling your physiology. The most effective technique is called box breathing. Inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4 counts, exhaling for 4 counts, and holding empty for 4 counts. This pattern activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest response that counteracts stress. The second technique is cognitive reprogramming. Changing the meaning you assign to triggering events. Your brain doesn't respond to reality. It responds to your interpretation of reality. Two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different emotional responses based on how they frame the situation. When someone criticizes you, you can frame it as an attack on your worth, or you can frame it as information about their perspective. When someone ignores you, you can frame it as rejection, or you can frame it as their distraction or personal issues having nothing to do with you. The key to effective reframing is having alternative interpretations ready before you need them. This is called preferring. Instead of trying to think of helpful perspectives while you're triggered, you develop a toolkit of alternative interpretations that you can access automatically. For example, when someone is rude to you, your preframes might include they're having a difficult day. They're dealing with stress I don't know about. This is about their emotional regulation, not about me. For this is an opportunity to practice staying calm. The third technique is what neuroscientists call labeling. When you notice you're getting triggered, simply naming the emotion reduces its intensity. Research shows that when you label an emotion, "I'm feeling frustrated. I notice anger arising. This is disappointment," it activates the prefrontal cortex and calms the amygdala. The act of putting your emotion into words creates enough distance between you and the emotion to prevent it from completely hijacking your thinking. Mindfulness meditation is perhaps the most powerful tool for developing emotional regulation. When you meditate, you're essentially training your brain to observe thoughts and emotions without immediately reacting to them. You develop what Buddhists call witness consciousness, the ability to watch your mental and emotional processes without being overwhelmed by them. Regular meditation literally changes your brain structure, thickening the prefrontal cortex and shrinking the amygdala over time. But you don't need to sit in lotus position for hours to develop emotional regulation. You can practice mindfulness throughout your day by simply paying attention to your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations without judgment. When you notice tension in your shoulders, you can breathe into that area and consciously relax. When you notice anxious thoughts, you can observe them like clouds passing through the sky rather than getting caught up in their content. Another powerful technique is called temporal distancing, imagining how you'll feel about the triggering situation in different time frames. Ask yourself, how important will this be in a week, in a month, in a year? This perspective shift activates the prefrontal cortex and reduces the emotional charge of present moment triggers. Most things that feel enormously important when we're triggered turn out to be relatively insignificant in the broader context of our lives. The practice of emotional regulation also involves building tolerance for discomfort. Many people react to triggers because they can't tolerate the uncomfortable sensations that arise in their body. They need to do something, anything, to make the discomfort go away. But learning to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it builds tremendous emotional resilience. You realize that emotions, no matter how intense, are temporary. They arise, peak, and naturally subside if you don't feed them with resistance or reactive behavior. Progressive muscle relaxation is another valuable technique. When you're triggered, your body holds tension in specific areas, usually your jaw, shoulders, and stomach. By systematically tensing and then releasing different muscle groups, you can teach your body how to release stress and return to a state of calm. This physical relaxation sends signals to your brain that you're safe, which helps regulate your emotional response. Chapter 5. Reframing triggers as growth opportunities. The most profound shift in dealing with difficult people comes when you stop seeing triggers as problems to avoid and start seeing them as opportunities for growth. This isn't just positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. It's a practical recognition that the people who challenge you the most are often the ones who contribute most to your emotional development, self-awareness, and personal strength. Every trigger reveals something important about your inner landscape. It shows you where you still have emotional work to do, what beliefs need updating, and which areas of your personality need strengthening. When someone's criticism stings more than it should, it reveals an area where your self-confidence could be stronger. When someone's behavior makes you feel powerless, it shows you where you need to develop better boundaries. When someone's success makes you feel inadequate, it highlights insecurities you haven't addressed. Think of triggers as your personal feedback system. They're like emotional X-rays that reveal the fractures in your psychological armor. Without this feedback, you might go through life unaware of your weak spots only to have them exploited in crucial moments when the stakes are higher. The person who triggers you in a low-stakes situation is actually preparing you for high-stakes situations where emotional regulation could make the difference between success and failure. This reframe transforms your relationship with difficult people entirely. Instead of dreading encounters with challenging individuals, you can approach them with curiosity and even gratitude. They're providing you with free training in emotional resilience, conflict resolution, and self-mastery. They're helping you develop skills that will serve you in every area of your life. Leadership. relationships, parenting, and personal achievement. Consider how athletes use resistance training to build strength. They don't avoid heavy weights because they're uncomfortable. They seek them out because they know that progressive resistance is what builds muscle. Emotional triggers work the same way. Each time you successfully regulate your emotions in the face of a trigger, you're building psychological muscle. You're proving to yourself that you can stay centered under pressure, which builds genuine confidence and self-respect. The key to reframing triggers effectively is to look for the specific lesson or growth opportunity in each situation. When someone dismisses your ideas, the growth opportunity might be learning to communicate more persuasively, developing thicker skin for criticism, or recognizing that not everyone will appreciate your perspective. When someone tries to manipulate you, the growth opportunity might be strengthening your boundaries, improving your ability to detect manipulation, or practicing assertive communication. This approach also helps you develop compassion for difficult people. When you understand that their challenging behavior often stems from their own unhealed wounds, unmet needs, or immature coping mechanisms, it becomes easier to respond with wisdom rather than reactivity. You realize that hurt people and their behavior is more about their internal struggle than about you personally. One powerful reframing technique is to ask yourself, what would someone who has already mastered this challenge do in this situation? This question immediately shifts you out of victim mode and into growth mode. Instead of focusing on how unfair or difficult the situation is, you start focusing on how you can handle it more skillfully. You begin to embody the person you want to become rather than reacting from who you used to be. Another valuable reframe is to see difficult people as your personal trainers for emotional fitness. Just as a physical trainer pushes you beyond your comfort zone to help you grow stronger, difficult people push you beyond your emotional comfort zone to help you develop greater resilience, patience, and wisdom. They're not your enemies. They're unknowing allies in your personal development journey. The practice of finding lessons in triggers also develops a crucial life skill: the ability to extract value from any situation. This skill serves you far beyond dealing with difficult people. It helps you bounce back from failures faster, learn from mistakes more effectively, and maintain optimism in the face of setbacks. You become someone who can find opportunity in any challenge and strength in any struggle. Reframing triggers as growth opportunities also prevents you from taking other people's behavior too personally. When you're focused on what you can learn from a situation, you're less likely to get caught up in ego battles or emotional drama. You maintain your perspective and emotional equilibrium because you're playing a different game. Not the game of being right or being liked, but the game of becoming stronger and wiser. This shift in perspective often creates a paradoxical effect. When you stop being triggered by difficult people, they often start treating you better. When you're no longer reactive, you're no longer as interesting to manipulate. When you respond with calm confidence instead of defensiveness, you command more respect. When you're genuinely curious about their perspective instead of fighting them, they often become more reasonable and collaborative. Remember that personal growth is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. There will always be new triggers to work with, deeper levels of emotional mastery to develop, and more sophisticated ways to handle challenging people and situations. Each trigger is an invitation to level up, to become more of who you're capable of being. The person who can remain calm, centered, and responsive in the face of any challenge is someone who can achieve anything they set their mind to. Chapter 6. Building psychological boundaries that can't be crossed. The most emotionally resilient people have something that reactive people lack: unshakable psychological boundaries. These aren't just rules about what behavior you'll accept. They're internal structures that protect your emotional well-being regardless of how others choose to behave. When you have strong psychological boundaries, other people's dysfunction bounces off you instead of penetrating your emotional core. Most people think boundaries are about controlling others. But that's backwards. Real boundaries are about controlling yourself. Specifically controlling your responses to other people's choices. When someone violates your boundary, the boundary isn't what stops them. It's what determines how you respond. A person with weak boundaries gets pulled into drama, arguments, and emotional chaos. A person with strong boundaries remains centered and chooses their response strategically. The first type of boundary you need is an energy boundary. This means you don't absorb other people's emotions as if they were your own. Many people are emotional sponges. They walk into a room and immediately pick up on everyone else's stress, anger, or anxiety. They think this makes them empathetic, but it actually makes them ineffective. You can't help someone who's drowning if you jump in the water and start drowning, too. Energy boundaries require you to distinguish between empathy and emotional contagion. Empathy means you understand what someone else is feeling without feeling it yourself. Emotional contagion means their emotions literally infect your emotional state. When you maintain energy boundaries, you can recognize that someone is upset, angry, or stressed without allowing their emotional state to contaminate yours. You remain a calm, stable presence that can actually help them regulate instead of adding to the chaos. Building energy boundaries starts with recognizing that you have a choice about which emotions you allow into your system. When someone comes to you angry, you don't have to become angry, too. When someone is panicking, you don't have to panic. When someone is being dramatic, you don't have to join the drama. You can acknowledge their emotional state without adopting it as your own. One powerful technique for maintaining energy boundaries is called emotional deflection. When someone directs negative emotions toward you, instead of absorbing them, you mentally deflect them back to their source. You recognize that their anger, criticism, or manipulation is information about their internal state, not a command for you to feel a certain way. Their emotions are like rain. You can acknowledge the weather without standing in it and getting soaked. The second crucial boundary is a responsibility boundary. This means you take complete responsibility for your own emotions, reactions, and life outcomes while refusing to take responsibility for other people's emotions, reactions, and life outcomes. Most triggers occur because people have confused boundaries about responsibility. They think they're responsible for making others happy, managing others' emotions, or fixing others' problems. At the same time, they unconsciously make others responsible for their own emotional state by getting triggered when people don't behave the way they want. Responsibility boundaries require you to release the illusion that you can control how others feel or behave. You can influence others through your actions and communication, but you cannot control their choices or emotional responses. When you truly accept this, you stop trying to manage other people's emotions and start managing your own. You stop walking on eggshells to avoid setting people off and you start speaking and acting from your authentic truth. This boundary also means refusing to be held emotionally hostage by other people's reactions. Some people use their emotions as weapons. They get angry, hurt, or offended to manipulate you into doing what they want. When you have strong responsibility boundaries, you can acknowledge their emotional reaction without feeling obligated to change your behavior to soothe them. Their emotions are their responsibility to manage, not yours to fix. The third essential boundary is a meaning-making boundary. This means you decide what things mean instead of automatically accepting other people's interpretations of reality. When someone calls you selfish, lazy, or incompetent, they're offering their interpretation of your behavior. You don't have to accept their interpretation as truth. You can consider their perspective, extract any useful feedback, and maintain your own assessment of yourself and your actions. Meaning-making boundaries prevent you from giving others the power to define your worth, capabilities, or identity. You become the author of your own story instead of letting others write your narrative for you. This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback or become arrogant and closed-minded. It means you filter input through your own judgment and values rather than automatically accepting whatever story others tell about you. The fourth boundary is an attention boundary. This means you control where you focus your mental energy rather than allowing others to hijack your attention with their drama, demands, or dysfunction. Your attention is your most precious resource. Where you focus your attention determines the quality of your experience and the direction of your life. When you let other people pull your attention into their chaos, you're giving them control over your mental and emotional state. Attention boundaries require you to become selective about what deserves your mental energy. Not every conflict needs your participation. Not every drama needs your attention. Not every crisis needs your emotional involvement. You learn to distinguish between situations that truly require your engagement and situations that are just attention-seeking behavior or emotional manipulation. Strong psychological boundaries don't make you cold or disconnected. They make you more genuinely helpful and effective in your relationships. When you're not constantly triggered, drained, or pulled into other people's dysfunction, you have more emotional resources to offer support when it's truly needed. You become a source of stability and wisdom rather than just another person adding to the chaos. The key to maintaining boundaries is consistency. Every time you violate your own boundaries by absorbing someone's negative emotions, taking responsibility for their choices, accepting their interpretation of reality, or giving them your attention when they're being manipulative, you train both yourself and them to expect boundary violations in the future. But every time you maintain your boundaries with calm confidence, you reinforce your psychological strength and teach others how to treat you. Chapter 7. Advanced Techniques for Staying Centered Under Pressure. When you're dealing with truly challenging people or high-stakes situations, basic emotional regulation techniques may not be enough. You need advanced mental strategies that work even when you're under intense pressure, facing persistent provocation, or dealing with skilled manipulators. These techniques are used by negotiators, emergency responders, and high-performance professionals who must maintain composure regardless of external circumstances. The first advanced technique is called emotional Aikido. In martial arts, Aikido teaches you to redirect an opponent's force rather than meeting it with force. Emotional Aikido works the same way. Instead of resisting or fighting someone's negative energy, you redirect it in a way that serves you. When someone comes at you with anger, instead of matching their anger or trying to calm them down, you redirect their energy by getting curious about their perspective. When someone tries to provoke you with insults, you redirect by focusing on what their behavior reveals about them rather than taking it personally. The key to emotional Aikido is remaining fluid rather than rigid. Rigid responses create resistance and escalation. Fluid responses absorb and redirect energy without creating friction. For example, if someone accuses you of being incompetent, a rigid response might be to defend your competence or attack their credibility. A fluid response might be, "It sounds like you have some concerns about my approach. Help me understand what specific results you're looking for." This redirects their attack energy into constructive dialogue. The second technique is perspective stacking. This involves rapidly shifting through multiple perspectives on the same situation to prevent any single interpretation from triggering you. When someone treats you rudely, you might stack these perspectives. This person is having a difficult day. They might be dealing with problems I know nothing about. This is teaching me patience. This is practice for handling more challenging situations. Their behavior says nothing about my worth. And this is actually useful feedback about their character. By rapidly cycling through multiple perspectives, you prevent your mind from fixating on the most triggering interpretation. You also train your brain to automatically generate alternative explanations for people's behavior, which builds emotional resilience over time. The goal isn't to find the right perspective, but to maintain cognitive flexibility and emotional stability. The third advanced technique is strategic vulnerability. Most people think vulnerability makes them weak and targetable, but strategic vulnerability actually makes you less triggerable and more influential. When you're comfortable acknowledging your mistakes, limitations, or emotional responses, you take away others' power to use these things against you. If someone tries to embarrass you by pointing out your flaws, you can disarm them by agreeing, "You're absolutely right. I do struggle with that sometimes. I'm working on improving it." Strategic vulnerability also builds authentic connection and trust. When you're not defensive or pretending to be perfect, people feel safer around you. They're more likely to be honest and collaborative rather than adversarial. Paradoxically, showing appropriate vulnerability makes you appear more confident and self-assured, not less. The fourth technique is temporal anchoring. This involves mentally anchoring yourself to a broader time frame when dealing with triggers in the moment. When someone's behavior is getting under your skin, you remind yourself of your long-term goals, values, and vision for your life. You ask yourself, how does this moment fit into the bigger picture of who I'm becoming? Or will this matter in the context of what I'm trying to achieve this year? Temporal anchoring prevents you from getting lost in the drama of the moment by connecting you to something larger and more meaningful. It helps you maintain perspective when emotions are running high and makes it easier to respond strategically rather than reactively. It's particularly powerful when dealing with people who are trying to bait you into arguments or emotional reactions. The fifth advanced technique is energy transmutation. Instead of trying to suppress or avoid negative emotions when they arise, you learn to transform them into useful energy. Anger can be transmuted into determination. Frustration can become focused problem-solving energy. Hurt can be transformed into compassion for others who are struggling. Anxiety can become heightened awareness and preparation. This technique requires practice and self-awareness, but it's incredibly powerful. Instead of being drained by difficult emotions, you learn to harness their energy for constructive purposes. You become like a psychological alchemist, turning the lead of negative experiences into the gold of personal growth and achievement. The sixth technique is strategic disengagement. This means knowing when to step away from a situation temporarily to prevent escalation and maintain your center. Strategic disengagement isn't running away or avoiding conflict. It's tactical withdrawal to preserve your emotional resources and return to the situation when you can be more effective. You might say something like, "I want to give this the attention it deserves. Let me think about it and get back to you." Or, "I'm feeling too emotional right now to have a productive conversation. Can we revisit this when I've had time to process?" This technique prevents you from saying or doing things you'll regret while buying you time to regulate your emotions and plan a more strategic response. It also models emotional maturity and self-awareness, which often influences others to approach the situation more thoughtfully as well. The seventh advanced technique is cognitive reappraisal in real time. This involves immediately reframing triggering events as they happen without waiting for your emotions to calm down. You train yourself to automatically ask empowering questions. How can I use this? What can I learn from this? How is this making me stronger? What would someone I admire do in this situation? These questions redirect your mind from victim mode to learner mode instantly. Real-time reappraisal requires practice, but it becomes automatic over time. Eventually, your brain starts looking for opportunities and lessons in challenging situations without conscious effort. This transforms you into someone who thrives under pressure rather than being crushed by it. Chapter 8. The 4 types of difficult people and how to handle each. Not all difficult people are the same, and one-size-fits-all approaches often backfire. Understanding the psychology behind different types of challenging behavior allows you to tailor your responses for maximum effectiveness. Each type of difficult person has specific triggers, motivations, and vulnerabilities that you can work with rather than against. The first type is the controller. Controllers have an overwhelming need to be in charge and make decisions for others. They micromanage, give unsolicited advice, and become agitated when others don't follow their directions. Their behavior stems from deep insecurity and fear of losing control. They believe that if they're not managing every detail, something bad will happen. Controllers often experienced chaos or unpredictability in their past, so control has become their primary coping mechanism. When dealing with controllers, the key is to give them a sense of control while maintaining your own autonomy. You can do this by offering choices rather than forcing them to accept only one option. Instead of saying, "I'm going to do it this way," you might say, "I see 2 possible approaches here. Which one do you think would work better?" This makes them feel involved in the decision-making process while still allowing you to guide the outcome. Another effective strategy with controllers is to acknowledge their expertise and ask for their input in areas where their control needs are legitimate. You have more experience with this than I do. What would you suggest? This satisfies their need to be the expert while building cooperation rather than resistance. The goal isn't to enable their controlling behavior but to channel it in productive directions. The second type is the attention seeker. These individuals have an insatiable need for attention, validation, and drama. They interrupt conversations to make it about them, create crises that require others to rescue them, and become upset when they're not the center of attention. Their behavior stems from deep insecurity and fear of being ignored or forgotten. They learned early that dramatic behavior gets attention, even if it's negative attention. With attention seekers, the strategy is to give them positive attention for appropriate behavior while refusing to reward dramatic or manipulative behavior. When they're behaving normally, acknowledge them. Ask their opinion or show interest in their thoughts. When they're creating drama, don't take the bait. Respond calmly and briefly, then redirect your attention elsewhere. For example, if an attention seeker creates a crisis and demands immediate help, you might respond, "That sounds stressful. Let me know what you decide to do about it." This acknowledges their situation without getting pulled into their drama. You're showing that you care without enabling their attention-seeking behavior. The third type is the critic. Critics have a compulsive need to point out flaws, mistakes, and problems. They rarely offer praise or encouragement, and they seem to find fault with everything. Their behavior usually stems from perfectionism, fear of failure, or low self-esteem. They criticize others as a way of feeling superior or protecting themselves from criticism. Often they're hardest on others in areas where they're most insecure about themselves when dealing with critics. Resist the urge to defend yourself or criticize them back. Instead, thank them for their input and ask clarifying questions. "Thanks for pointing that out. What specifically would you suggest to improve it?" This approach disarms their criticism by treating it as helpful feedback rather than an attack. It also forces them to be constructive rather than just destructive. You can also use the agree and redirect technique with critics. Find something in their criticism that you can legitimately agree with, then redirect the conversation towards solutions. "You're right that this could be improved. What if we tried?" This prevents defensive arguments while moving the focus from problems to solutions. The fourth type is the victim. Victims see themselves as powerless and believe that everything bad that happens to them is someone else's fault. They complain constantly but resist solutions, preferring to stay stuck in their problems rather than take responsibility for changing them. Their behavior stems from learned helplessness and secondary gains. The attention, sympathy, and excuse from responsibility that comes with being a victim with victims. The key is to refuse to enable their helplessness while showing compassion for their struggles. Don't try to solve their problems for them, but don't dismiss their feelings either. Instead, ask questions that encourage them to think about their own power and options. "That sounds really difficult. What do you think your options are? Or what would need to change for this situation to improve?" Avoid giving advice to victims unless they specifically ask for it because they'll usually reject it and explain why it won't work. Instead, listen empathetically, but don't get pulled into endless problem discussions. Set time boundaries around these conversations. "I have about 10 minutes to talk. What's the most important thing you want me to know?" Remember that people often combine elements of multiple types and their behavior may change depending on stress levels, circumstances, or their relationship with you. The key is to stay flexible and adjust your approach based on what you observe working in each specific situation. Understanding these patterns also helps you avoid taking their behavior personally. When you recognize that the controller's need to manage you stems from their own anxiety, the attention seeker's drama comes from their insecurity. The critic's negativity reflects their perfectionism, and the victim's complaints come from their sense of powerlessness. You can respond with strategic compassion rather than reactive frustration. Most importantly, maintain your own boundaries and well-being. Regardless of which type you're dealing with, you can understand someone's psychology and respond skillfully without sacrificing your own emotional health or enabling their dysfunction. The goal is always to interact in a way that preserves your peace of mind while maximizing the chances of a positive outcome. Chapter 9. The power of non-reactive responses that disarm any attack. When someone attacks you verbally, criticizes your character, or tries to provoke you into an argument, your response in that moment determines whether the situation escalates or de-escalates. Most people either fight back, which creates more conflict, or shut down, which can be seen as weakness. But there's a third option that few people know about. The non-reactive response that completely disarms the attack and often transforms the entire dynamic. Non-reactive responses work because they refuse to play the game that the other person is trying to start. When someone attacks you, they're unconsciously expecting you to defend, counterattack, or collapse. These are the only responses they know how to handle. When you respond with calm curiosity, genuine concern for their well-being or strategic vulnerability, you break the pattern they're expecting and force them to shift into a different mode of interaction. The first type of non-reactive response is the curious inquiry. When someone makes a hostile or critical comment, instead of defending yourself or attacking back, you respond with genuine curiosity about their perspective. That's interesting. Help me understand what you mean by that. Or, it sounds like you have some strong feelings about this. Can you tell me more about where that's coming from? This response is powerful because it transforms you from an adversary into an investigator. You're no longer someone they need to fight. You're someone who's interested in understanding them. Most people are so rarely truly listen to that. When you respond with genuine curiosity, their hostility often melts away and is replaced by a desire to be understood. The key to making curious inquiry work is that your curiosity must be genuine, not sarcastic or condescending. You're not trying to trap them or make them look foolish. You're genuinely interested in understanding their perspective, even if you disagree with it. This requires letting go of your ego's need to be right and embracing the possibility that you might learn something valuable from their point of view. The second type of non-reactive response is emotional validation. This means acknowledging the emotions behind someone's words without necessarily agreeing with their content. It sounds like you're really frustrated about this, or I can see that this is important to you. You're validating their right to have feelings without validating their behavior or agreeing with their perspective. Emotional validation is incredibly disarming because most people attack when they feel unheard or misunderstood. When you acknowledge their emotional state, you're meeting their deeper need for recognition, which often eliminates their need to attack. They feel seen and heard, which is usually what they were trying to achieve through their aggressive behavior. The third type is strategic agreement. This involves finding something in their criticism or attack that you can legitimately agree with, then using that agreement as a bridge to more productive dialogue. If someone says you never listen to anyone, you might respond, "You're right that I could be better at listening. I value your input and I want to make sure I understand your perspective. Can you help me understand what specifically makes you feel unheard?" Strategic agreement works because it removes the adversarial dynamic instead of fighting about whether their accusation is true. You're working together to solve the underlying problem. It also demonstrates emotional maturity and self-awareness, which often inspires the other person to respond more maturely as well. The fourth type is concerned redirection. This involves expressing genuine concern for the person's well-being and redirecting the conversation away from attack mode. It seems like something's really bothering you. Is everything okay? Or you seem stressed about something bigger than this. Do you want to talk about what's really going on? This response works because it recognizes that most attacks are not really about the surface issue. They're usually the result of stress, frustration, or unmet needs in other areas of the person's life. When you address the underlying emotional state rather than the surface attack, you often discover what's really driving their behavior. The fifth type is graceful deflection. This involves acknowledging their comment without engaging with its hostile intent, then smoothly redirecting to more constructive territory. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. What would you like to see happen differently? Or, I hear that you're not happy with how things are going. What would a better outcome look like for you? Graceful deflection allows you to acknowledge their communication without getting pulled into defensive arguments or personal attacks. You're staying focused on problem solving and solution finding rather than getting lost in who's right or wrong. The sixth type is transparent vulnerability. This involves honestly acknowledging your own feelings or limitations in response to their attack. I have to admit that stings to hear. I'm working on that area of my life and I know I'm not perfect. Can you help me understand how I can improve? Or I can see that I've upset you and that wasn't my intention. What can I do to make this right? Transparent vulnerability is perhaps the most powerful non-reactive response because it requires tremendous courage and creates immediate intimacy and connection. It's very difficult for someone to maintain an attacking stance when you respond with honest vulnerability. It transforms the dynamic from conflict to collaboration almost instantly. The key to all non-reactive responses is timing and authenticity. If you use these techniques manipulatively or sarcastically, they'll backfire. They work because they come from a place of genuine desire to understand, connect, and resolve the underlying issue. They require you to temporarily set aside your ego and focus on the relationship and the outcome you actually want. Remember that non-reactive responses don't guarantee that the other person will respond positively. Some people are so committed to conflict that they'll reject your attempts at de-escalation. But even in those cases, you'll have maintained your dignity, demonstrated emotional maturity, and avoided getting pulled into unnecessary drama. You'll also have given yourself and any observers a clear picture of who's actually interested in resolution and who's just looking for a fight. Chapter 10. Building your circle of influence through emotional mastery. One of the most profound shifts that occurs when you master emotional regulation is the transformation of your social environment. As you become less reactive and more centered, you naturally attract different types of people into your life while repelling those who thrive on drama and dysfunction. This isn't about becoming elitist or judgmental. It's about the natural law that like attracts like. When you operate from emotional maturity, you attract others who value emotional maturity. People are drawn to those who can remain calm under pressure, respond thoughtfully to challenges, and maintain their center regardless of external circumstances. These qualities are rare and valuable, making you someone others want to be around, work with, and learn from. Conversely, people who thrive on drama, manipulation, and emotional chaos will find you less interesting because you don't provide the reactive responses they're seeking. This shift in your social environment has far-reaching effects on every area of your life. In your career, you'll find yourself working with more rational, collaborative people who make decisions based on merit rather than office politics or emotional manipulation. In your relationships, you'll attract partners who are emotionally mature and capable of healthy communication rather than those who use drama and conflict to meet their emotional needs. The process of upgrading your social circle happens naturally, but you can accelerate it by being intentional about the energy you bring to every interaction. When you consistently demonstrate emotional regulation, clear boundaries, and authentic communication, you set a standard that influences everyone around you. Some people will rise to meet that standard, while others will naturally drift away because the dynamic no longer serves their dysfunction. Your emotional mastery also gives you tremendous influence in group settings. When tensions rise in meetings, family gatherings or social situations, the person who can remain calm and facilitate constructive dialogue becomes the natural leader. People look to you for stability and guidance because you've proven that you can think clearly and respond wisely even when emotions are running high. This influence comes not from trying to control others, but from mastering yourself. When you're not triggered by other people's behavior, you have the mental space to understand their perspectives, identify underlying needs, and suggest solutions that work for everyone. You become a bridge builder rather than a combatant, someone who can find common ground, even in polarized situations. The key to building positive influence through emotional mastery is consistency. People need to know they can count on you to be steady, rational, and fair regardless of circumstances. If you're calm and centered most of the time, but occasionally blow up or become reactive, people will remember the exceptions more than the rule. Consistency builds trust, and trust is the foundation of genuine influence. Another crucial aspect of building influence through emotional mastery is learning to speak to people's higher nature rather than their lower impulses. Instead of appealing to fear, anger, or insecurity to motivate behavior, you inspire others by connecting with their values, aspirations, and desire to be their best selves. This creates sustainable motivation and genuine buy-in rather than temporary compliance based on pressure or manipulation. Your emotional mastery also models possibility for others. When people see someone who can remain unruffled by criticism, unmoved by drama, and focused on solutions rather than problems, it expands their sense of what's possible for themselves. You become living proof that emotional chaos is not an inevitable part of human interaction, that there's another way to navigate challenging relationships and difficult situations. This modeling effect is particularly powerful with children, employees, and anyone who looks up to you. They learn not from your words about how to handle difficult people, but from observing how you actually handle difficult people. When they see you respond to aggression with curiosity, meet criticism with openness, and transform conflict into collaboration, they internalize these strategies as possibilities for their own lives. Building influence through emotional mastery also requires strategic vulnerability and authentic connection. People don't trust or follow those who seem perfect or invulnerable. They connect with those who are genuinely human but who have learned to handle their humanity skillfully. Sharing appropriate struggles, admitting mistakes, and showing how you've learned from challenges creates the kind of authentic connection that generates real influence. The ultimate goal isn't to become influential for its own sake, but to create the kind of environment where everyone can thrive. When you use your emotional mastery to build others up rather than tear them down, to create safety rather than generate fear, and to facilitate growth rather than maintain control, you contribute to a more conscious and collaborative world. Remember that true influence is always in service of something greater than yourself. The emotional mastery you develop in dealing with difficult people isn't just for your own peace of mind. It's a gift you can offer to everyone around you. You become a source of stability in an unstable world, a voice of reason in emotional chaos, and a living example of what's possible when someone commits to growing beyond their triggers and reactions. Chapter 11. The daily practices that rewire your brain for unshakable calm. Emotional mastery isn't built through occasional efforts when you remember to stay calm. It's built through daily practices that systematically rewire your brain for resilience. Just as physical fitness requires consistent training, psychological fitness requires deliberate daily actions that strengthen your emotional regulation circuits and weaken your reactive patterns. The most emotionally resilient people have specific routines and practices that maintain their center regardless of external chaos. The foundation of emotional resilience is morning mental conditioning. The first hour of your day sets the tone for how you'll respond to challenges throughout the day. Most people wake up and immediately check their phones, flooding their minds with news, social media, and other people's agendas before they've even established their own mental state. This reactive approach to mornings creates a reactive approach to life. Instead, create a morning routine that puts you in control of your mental and emotional state from the moment you wake up. Start with 5 minutes of deep breathing or meditation to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and establish calm awareness. Follow this with visualization where you mentally rehearse handling challenging situations with grace and confidence. See yourself staying centered when someone criticizes you, responding thoughtfully when someone tries to provoke you, and maintaining your boundaries when someone attempts to manipulate you. Mental rehearsal is one of the most powerful tools for emotional preparation because your brain doesn't distinguish between vivid mental experiences and actual experiences. When you repeatedly visualize yourself responding to triggers with calm confidence, you're literally programming your nervous system to respond that way in real situations. Professional athletes use this technique to improve performance under pressure. And you can use it to improve emotional performance under stress. The second crucial daily practice is strategic journaling. This isn't just writing about your feelings. It's analyzing your emotional patterns and responses with the goal of understanding and improving them. Each evening, spend 10 minutes reviewing your day through the lens of emotional mastery. What situations triggered you? How did you respond? What would you do differently next time? What patterns do you notice in your triggers? What growth opportunities did difficult people provide? This reflection process serves multiple functions. First, it helps you identify your specific trigger patterns so you can prepare for them more effectively. Second, it reinforces the lessons learned from challenging situations so you don't have to repeat the same mistakes. Third, it trains your brain to automatically look for learning opportunities in difficult situations rather than just feeling victimized by them. Include in your journal practice a daily gratitude section specifically focused on difficult people and challenging situations. This might sound counterintuitive, but it's incredibly powerful. Write about how challenging people helped you practice patience, how stressful situations taught you resilience, or how conflicts revealed areas for growth. This practice rewires your brain to see difficulties as gifts rather than curses, which fundamentally changes your emotional response to them. The third essential practice is progressive stress inoculation. This involves deliberately exposing yourself to small, manageable challenges to build your tolerance for larger ones. Just as vaccines expose you to weakened versions of diseases to build immunity, progressive stress inoculation exposes you to controlled stress to build emotional immunity. This might involve having difficult conversations you've been avoiding, setting boundaries with people who make you uncomfortable, or speaking up in situations where you normally stay quiet. The key is to start small and gradually increase the difficulty as your confidence and skills improve. Each successful navigation of a challenging situation builds evidence that you can handle whatever life throws at you. You can also practice stress inoculation through deliberate discomfort exercises. Take cold showers to build tolerance for physical discomfort. Practice public speaking to build tolerance for social discomfort. Do challenging workouts to build tolerance for mental discomfort. These practices don't directly relate to emotional triggers, but they strengthen your general resilience and confidence in your ability to handle difficult situations. The fourth practice is mindful trigger observation. Throughout your day, pay attention to the moments when you feel your emotional state shifting. Notice the physical sensations that arise when someone says something that bothers you. Observe the thoughts that automatically arise when you encounter criticism. Watch how your energy changes when you're around different types of people. This observation practice creates what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own mental processes. Instead of being lost in your emotions, you develop the capacity to watch them arise and pass away. This awareness creates a buffer between trigger and response that allows you to choose your actions rather than being hijacked by automatic reactions. The key to mindful observation is maintaining curiosity rather than judgment. You're not trying to stop emotions from arising or criticizing yourself for having them. You're simply watching how your internal experience unfolds in response to external events. This curious scientific attitude toward your own emotions reduces their power to control you. The fifth daily practice is strategic social exposure. Instead of avoiding difficult people or challenging situations, deliberately seek them out in controlled doses. This doesn't mean surrounding yourself with toxic people, but it does mean not going out of your way to avoid every uncomfortable interaction. If there's someone at work who typically triggers you, make an effort to have brief, pleasant interactions with them. If there's a type of social situation that makes you anxious, attend one occasionally. If there's a kind of conversation you usually avoid, practice initiating one in a low-stakes environment. Each positive navigation of a typically challenging situation builds confidence and reduces the emotional charge of similar future situations. The sixth practice is energy management throughout the day. Monitor your emotional energy levels and take proactive steps to maintain them. This might involve taking short meditation breaks, doing breathing exercises during stressful moments, or physically removing yourself from draining situations before they overwhelm you. Learn to recognize the early warning signs that your emotional resources are getting depleted. Irritability, impatience, difficulty concentrating, or physical tension. When you notice these signs, take immediate action to restore your energy before you become reactive. This might be as simple as stepping outside for fresh air, doing some stretching, or listening to music that uplifts you. Energy management also involves being strategic about when you engage in challenging interactions. If possible, schedule difficult conversations for times when your emotional resources are highest, typically earlier in the day. Avoid making important decisions or having sensitive discussions when you're tired, hungry, or stressed from other situations. The seventh practice is evening integration and planning. Before bed, spend a few minutes integrating the lessons from your day and planning your approach for tomorrow. Review what worked well in challenging situations and what you want to improve. Set intentions for how you want to show up the next day. Visualize yourself handling potential challenges with grace and wisdom. This evening practice serves as both closure for the day and preparation for tomorrow. It ensures that you're continuously learning from your experiences and deliberately evolving your approach rather than repeating the same patterns indefinitely. It also helps you sleep better because you've processed the day's experiences rather than carrying unresolved emotional energy into your rest. Chapter 12. Transforming your relationship with criticism and rejection. Criticism and rejection are perhaps the most universal triggers that keep people trapped in reactive patterns. The fear of being judged, dismissed, or rejected drives most people leasing behavior, prevents authentic self-expression, and creates enormous stress in relationships and professional situations. But what if criticism and rejection weren't threats to be avoided, but valuable information to be processed? What if your response to negative feedback became a source of confidence rather than a source of anxiety? The first step in transforming your relationship with criticism is understanding why it triggers you so intensely. Criticism activates ancient survival circuits because for most of human history, being rejected by the tribe meant death. Your brain is wired to interpret social rejection as a physical threat, which is why criticism can feel almost physically painful. Understanding this helps normalize your emotional response while empowering you to override it with conscious choice. Most people have an unconscious belief that criticism means something terrible about them. That they're inadequate, unworthy, or fundamentally flawed. But criticism actually means something about the person giving it, their standards, preferences, emotional state, communication style, and relationship with you. When someone criticizes your work, they're revealing their criteria for good work, not delivering the ultimate truth about your abilities. When someone rejects your ideas, they're showing their perspective and priorities, not proving that your ideas lack value. This reframe immediately reduces the personal sting of criticism because you stop making it about your worth and start seeing it as information about the other person's internal experience. You can consider their feedback without accepting their judgment of your value as a person. You can extract useful insights without internalizing their emotional reaction as truth about yourself. The second transformation involves learning to separate feedback from delivery. Many people reject potentially valuable feedback because it's delivered harshly, rudely, or inappropriately. They get so triggered by how something is said that they can't hear what is being said. But developing emotional regulation allows you to filter content from delivery, extracting useful information regardless of how it's packaged. When someone gives you feedback in an attacking or condescending way, you can mentally translate it into more neutral language. If someone says you never pay attention to details, you can hear there are some detail-oriented areas where I think you could improve. If someone says your presentation was boring, you can hear this person prefers a different style of presentation. This translation process allows you to receive the potentially valuable core message without being derailed by the emotional wrapper. The third transformation is developing evaluation criteria for criticism. Not all feedback is equally valuable, and part of emotional maturity is learning to discriminate between criticism worth considering and criticism worth dismissing. Ask yourself, does this person have expertise or experience relevant to what they're criticizing? Do they have my best interests at heart, or are they projecting their own issues? Is their feedback specific and actionable or vague and judgmental? Have they invested time in understanding my situation? Or are they making superficial judgments? Criticism from mentors, experts in your field, or people who care about your growth deserves more consideration than criticism from random strangers, competitors, or people who are clearly projecting their own insecurities. You can listen respectfully to anyone's feedback without giving equal weight to all opinions. Developing discernment about whose opinions matter helps you stay open to valuable feedback while protecting yourself from toxic criticism. The fourth transformation involves learning to mine criticism for growth opportunities. Even harsh or unfair criticism often contains kernels of truth that can accelerate your development if you're willing to look for them. Instead of defending against criticism, train yourself to ask, is there any aspect of this feedback that could help me improve? What would need to be true for this criticism to be valid? How could I use this feedback to become better at what I do? This treasure hunting approach to criticism transforms it from a threat into a resource. You become someone who can extract value from any feedback regardless of how it's delivered or motivated. This skill is incredibly valuable because it means you're always learning and growing, while people who are defensive about criticism remain stuck in their current level of ability. The fifth transformation is learning to respond to criticism in ways that demonstrate emotional maturity and often improve relationships instead of defending, attacking, or shutting down when criticized. You can respond with curiosity, appreciation, and commitment to growth. Thank you for taking the time to share that feedback. Can you help me understand what specifically would look different if I improved in this area? Or I appreciate you being honest with me. Let me think about how I can apply this. These responses do several powerful things. First, they demonstrate that you're secure enough to hear feedback without becoming defensive. Second, they often transform the critic from an adversary into a collaborator by showing that you value their input. Third, they give you more detailed information that can actually help you improve. Fourth, they model emotional maturity that often elevates the entire conversation. The sixth transformation involves reframing rejection as redirection. Every no is actually valuable information about fit, timing, or approach. When someone rejects your romantic interest, they're saving you from pursuing someone who isn't genuinely attracted to you. When someone rejects your job application, they're preventing you from working somewhere that isn't the right fit. When someone rejects your business proposal, they're giving you information about their needs, priorities, or decision-making criteria. This reframe transforms rejection from evidence of your inadequacy into data about compatibility and strategy. Instead of taking rejection personally, you can use it to refine your approach, better understand your target audience, or recognize that you're pursuing the wrong opportunities. Each rejection brings you closer to the right fit rather than farther from your goals. The seventh transformation is developing what researchers call rejection resilience, the ability to maintain confidence and motivation despite repeated rejections. This involves understanding that rejection is a numbers game in most areas of life. Successful salespeople know that most prospects will say no. Successful entrepreneurs know that most investors will pass. Successful writers know that most publishers will reject their manuscripts. The key is having enough emotional resilience to continue putting yourself out there until you find the right matches. Rejection resilience is built by celebrating the process rather than just the outcomes. Instead of measuring your worth by how often you're accepted, measure it by how courageously you're putting yourself out there. Each time you risk rejection by asking for what you want, sharing your authentic thoughts, or pursuing an opportunity, you're demonstrating bravery regardless of the outcome. The final transformation involves using criticism and rejection to develop authentic self-validation. When your sense of worth comes primarily from external approval, criticism and rejection are devastating because they threaten your entire foundation. But when you develop the ability to validate your own efforts, growth, and worth, criticism and rejection become just information rather than verdicts on your value as a person. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or close to feedback. It means developing an internal compass that allows you to appreciate praise without being dependent on it and receive criticism without being destroyed by it. You know your own efforts, intentions, and growth trajectory in ways that no external observer can fully understand. This internal validation becomes the stable foundation that allows you to engage authentically with the world without being at the mercy of others' opinions. Chapter 13. Advanced Mental Models for Emotional Invincibility. The difference between people who occasionally manage their emotions well and those who are consistently unshakable lies in their mental models, the internal frameworks they use to interpret reality. Most people operate with mental models that make them vulnerable to emotional manipulation and trigger responses. But there are specific ways of thinking about life, relationships and challenges that create genuine emotional invincibility. The first mental model is understanding life as a game with multiple levels. In this model, most people are playing the basic level where they react to everything that happens to them. They get upset when things don't go their way, take everything personally, and spend enormous energy trying to control outcomes they can't control. But there are higher levels where you play different games with different rules. At the intermediate level, you realize that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. You stop trying to manage other people's behavior and start managing your own reactions. At the advanced level, you realize that challenges and difficult people are actually opportunities to develop skills, strength, and wisdom. At the master level, you understand that every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, is contributing to your growth and evolution. This level's model prevents you from taking life's challenges personally because you understand that difficulties are part of the game, not evidence that something is wrong with you or your life. Just as a video game gets more challenging as you advance to higher levels, life presents greater challenges as you develop greater capacity to handle them. Instead of being frustrated by difficulties, you can appreciate them as signs that you're progressing. The second mental model is the concept of emotional Aikido at a philosophical level. In traditional Aikido, you don't try to stop or overcome your opponent's force. You redirect it in a way that neutralizes the attack while potentially helping the attacker. This principle applies perfectly to emotional conflict. Instead of trying to stop people from being difficult or forcing them to treat you differently, you learn to redirect their negative energy in ways that serve your growth and sometimes even helps them. When someone attacks your character instead of defending or counterattacking, you can redirect their energy by getting curious about what's driving their behavior. When someone tries to make you feel guilty, you can redirect by focusing on what healthy boundaries would look like in the relationship. When someone tries to provoke you into an argument, you can redirect by asking what outcome they're actually hoping for. This approach transforms conflicts from battles you can lose into opportunities for connection and growth. The third mental model is understanding yourself as a scientist studying human behavior. In this model, every interaction is a research opportunity. Difficult people become fascinating case studies rather than sources of stress. You're not personally invested in the outcomes because you're gathering data about human psychology, communication patterns, and social dynamics. This scientific mindset creates immediate emotional distance from triggering situations because you're observing rather than participating in the drama. You might notice interesting, when I didn't react to their provocation, they escalated their behavior. What does that tell me about their emotional state and typical interaction patterns? Are fascinating. When I validated their feelings before addressing the issue, they became much more reasonable. I wonder if that technique would work in similar situations. The scientific approach also makes you incredibly effective in difficult relationships because you're constantly experimenting with different approaches and learning what works. You become a student of human nature rather than a victim of it. The fourth mental model is the concept of emotional economics. Understanding that every emotional reaction has costs and benefits and making deliberate choices about where to invest your emotional energy. Getting angry might feel satisfying in the moment, but it costs you peace of mind, clouds your judgment, and often damages relationships. Staying calm might require more effort initially, but it preserves your energy, maintains your clarity, and often leads to better outcomes. In this model, you become strategic about your emotions rather than just experiencing them automatically. You ask questions like, is getting upset about this worth the cost to my emotional state? Will reacting emotionally help me achieve my goals in this situation? How can I invest my emotional energy in ways that serve my long-term interests? This approach doesn't make you cold or calculating. It makes you intentional about your emotional responses. The fifth mental model is understanding yourself as the author of your own story rather than a character in other people's stories. Most people live their lives reacting to other people's plots, trying to get approval from other people's narratives and feeling bad when they're not the hero in someone else's story. But when you understand yourself as the author of your own story, you realize that other people's opinions, criticisms, and rejections are just feedback about their stories, not verdicts on yours. In your story, challenges are character development opportunities. Difficult people are supporting characters who help you grow stronger and wiser. Setbacks are plot twists that redirect you toward better opportunities. Criticism is information that helps you refine your character. This authorship model gives you complete sovereignty over the meaning of your experiences and makes it impossible for others to write your narrative for you. The sixth mental model is understanding emotional mastery as a martial art that you practice daily. Just as martial artists train consistently to maintain and improve their skills, emotional masters have daily practices that strengthen their psychological abilities. They don't expect to achieve perfect emotional control overnight, but they commit to incremental improvement over time. This martial arts model makes challenges feel like sparring sessions rather than genuine threats. When someone tries to provoke you, you're not personally offended. You're grateful for the opportunity to practice your emotional regulation skills. When someone criticizes you harshly, you're not devastated. You're testing your ability to extract value from difficult feedback. This approach transforms every difficult interaction into training for becoming more emotionally skilled. The seventh mental model is understanding that everyone is doing the best they can with their current level of consciousness and capability. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or lowering your standards, but it means recognizing that people's actions are determined by their understanding, emotional regulation skills, and unhealed wounds rather than by their fundamental nature. This model generates automatic compassion for difficult people because you understand that their challenging behavior is a symptom of their internal struggle, not a personal attack on you. You can maintain boundaries and protect yourself while still recognizing their humanity. You don't take their behavior personally because you understand it's coming from their limitations, not their assessment of your worth. The eighth mental model is viewing your emotional development as contributing to the evolution of human consciousness. When you choose to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion, you're not just improving your own life. You're modeling a higher way of being for everyone around you. Your emotional mastery gives others permission to be more conscious in their own lives. This larger purpose model makes the effort required for emotional mastery feel meaningful rather than burdensome. You're not just working on yourself for selfish reasons. You're contributing to humanity's collective emotional intelligence. You're helping create a world where people interact more consciously, resolve conflicts more skillfully, and treat each other with greater wisdom and compassion. Chapter 14. Building systems that protect your peace automatically. True emotional freedom doesn't come from constantly monitoring your reactions and trying to stay calm through willpower alone. It comes from building systems, environmental, social, and personal structures that automatically protect your emotional well-being and reduce your exposure to unnecessary stress. The most emotionally resilient people don't just have better coping skills, they have better life systems that prevent many problems from occurring in the first place. The first system to build is an environmental design that supports emotional regulation. Your physical environment has a profound impact on your emotional state, and small changes can make enormous differences in your daily stress levels. Create spaces in your home that promote calm. Areas that are clean, organized, and free from unnecessary stimulation. Remove or minimize visual clutter that creates background stress. Add elements that promote relaxation like plants, natural light, or calming colors. Design your work environment to minimize stress triggers whenever possible. This might mean organizing your workspace to reduce visual chaos, using noise-canceling headphones to limit auditory distractions, or positioning your desk to avoid constant visual interruptions. If you can't control your physical work environment, create a portable calm kit. Items like essential oils, calming music, or stress relief tools that you can use to regulate your environment wherever you are. The second system involves curating your information diet. Most people consume information reactively, exposing themselves to news, social media, and conversations that increase their stress levels without providing any real benefit. Create intentional boundaries around information consumption. Limit news exposure to specific times and sources rather than allowing it to constantly intrude on your mental space. Curate your social media feeds to minimize exposure to outrage, drama, and negativity. Be especially careful about consuming information first thing in the morning or last thing before bed. Your brain is most impressionable during these times, and starting or ending your day with stressful information creates a reactive mental state that colors your entire experience. Instead, begin and end your days with content that inspires, educates, or calms you. The third system is building a social environment that supports your emotional well-being. This means being strategic about who you spend time with and how you structure your relationships. Gradually reduce time spent with people who consistently drain your energy. Create drama or trigger your worst impulses. This doesn't necessarily mean cutting people out completely, but it does mean being intentional about when, where, and how you interact with them. Simultaneously invest more time and energy in relationships with people who inspire you to be your best self, who handle conflict maturely, and who share your commitment to personal growth. These relationships become a source of strength and stability that helps you handle difficult people in other areas of your life. The more surrounded you are by emotionally mature people, the less reactive you become to the immature behavior of others. Create clear boundaries around your time and energy. Learn to say no to requests, invitations, and commitments that don't align with your values or goals. Most people-pleasing behavior stems from guilt about disappointing others. But saying yes to everything means saying no to your own well-being and important priorities. Practice responding to requests with phrases like, "Let me check my calendar and get back to you," rather than automatically agreeing to everything. The fourth system involves building buffer zones around stressful situations. Instead of rushing from one challenging situation to another, create transition time that allows you to regulate your emotions and reset your energy. If you have a difficult meeting scheduled, build in 15 minutes afterward for breathing, journaling, or other regulation practices. If you're going to spend time with a challenging person, prepare mentally beforehand and plan self-care activities afterward. Use commute time strategically to transition between different environments and roles. Instead of using travel time to make calls, check emails, or consume stressful content, use it to decompress. Listen to calming music, practice gratitude, or mentally prepare for what's ahead. This transforms potentially stressful transition time into opportunities for emotional regulation. The fifth system is creating accountability and support structures for your emotional development. Find people who share your commitment to emotional growth and create regular check-ins where you can share challenges, celebrate progress, and learn from each other's experiences. This might be a formal coaching relationship, a growth-minded friend, or a support group focused on personal development. Having external accountability makes it much easier to maintain your emotional regulation practices when you're busy, stressed, or discouraged. It also provides perspective when you're too close to a situation to see it clearly. Other people can often spot patterns in your behavior or suggest strategies that you might not see on your own. The sixth system involves automating your stress management practices. Instead of trying to remember to regulate your emotions when you're already triggered, build regulation practices into your daily routine so they happen automatically. Set reminders on your phone to do breathing exercises at regular intervals. Schedule meditation or reflection time in your calendar like any other important appointment. Create evening routines that help you process the day's stress and prepare for restorative sleep. Make emotional regulation as automatic as brushing your teeth. The goal is to maintain your emotional equilibrium through consistent practices rather than trying to rescue yourself from stress after it's already accumulated. Prevention is always easier and more effective than treatment. The seventh system is developing early warning detection for your stress levels. Learn to recognize the physical, mental, and emotional signals that indicate your stress is building before it reaches critical levels. This might include noticing muscle tension, changes in your breathing, irritability, difficulty concentrating, or changes in your sleep patterns. Once you can detect stress early, you can implement intervention strategies before your emotional state becomes overwhelming. This might mean taking a short break, doing some physical movement, calling a supportive friend, or practicing breathing exercises. The earlier you catch rising stress, the easier it is to manage. The eighth system involves creating recovery rituals for after difficult interactions or challenging days. Instead of just hoping you'll bounce back from stress naturally, have specific practices that help you restore your emotional equilibrium. This might include physical exercise, spending time in nature, creative activities, spiritual practices, or connecting with supportive people. Make these recovery rituals non-negotiable parts of your routine, especially after particularly challenging situations. Treat emotional recovery with the same seriousness you would treat physical recovery after intense exercise. Your emotional well-being requires intentional restoration, not just time passing. The ninth system is building financial and practical independence that reduces your vulnerability to emotional manipulation. When you're financially dependent on someone, it's much harder to maintain boundaries with them. When you lack practical skills or resources, you're more likely to tolerate poor treatment because you need other people's help. Invest in developing skills, building financial reserves, and creating independence in areas where dependence makes you vulnerable to mistreatment. This isn't about becoming completely self-sufficient, but about having enough autonomy to make choices based on what's healthy rather than what you can afford or manage. The final system is regularly updating and refining all your other systems. What works for you now might not work as your life circumstances change, as you grow and develop, or as you encounter new challenges. Schedule regular reviews of your emotional well-being systems to assess what's working, what needs adjustment, and what new strategies you might need to develop. Remember that building these systems takes time and experimentation. Start with one or two areas and gradually build more comprehensive support structures for your emotional well-being. The goal isn't perfection, but rather creating a lifestyle that naturally supports emotional regulation and reduces your exposure to unnecessary stress and drama. Chapter 15. Integration. Becoming unshakable in all areas of life. The ultimate goal of mastering emotional triggers isn't just to stay calm during conflicts or handle difficult people more effectively. It's to integrate these skills so completely into your life that emotional mastery becomes your natural way of being in the world. When you reach this level of integration, you don't have to think about staying calm or remember to use techniques. Responding with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion becomes as automatic as breathing. True integration means that your emotional mastery serves your larger life vision rather than just helping you cope with problems. The skills you've developed for handling difficult people become the same skills that help you pursue ambitious goals, build meaningful relationships, lead others effectively, and contribute something valuable to the world. Your ability to stay centered under pressure becomes a competitive advantage in every area of your life. In your career, emotional mastery transforms you into someone who thrives under pressure rather than being overwhelmed by it. You become the person others look to for stability during crisis. The one who can think clearly when everyone else is panicking, and the leader who can make difficult decisions without being clouded by emotions. Your ability to handle criticism constructively makes you coachable and continuously improving. Your skill at managing difficult people makes you effective at team building, negotiation, and conflict resolution. These abilities don't just make you more promotable. They make you more valuable in any role you undertake. Whether you're an entrepreneur dealing with demanding clients, an employee navigating office politics, or a leader making tough decisions, your emotional regulation skills become the foundation for your professional success in your relationships. Emotional mastery allows you to love more deeply and authentically because you're not constantly defending yourself or trying to manage other people's emotions. You can be genuinely present with your partner because you're not triggered by their moods or behaviors. You can parent more effectively because you're not reactive to your children's emotional outbursts or challenging behaviors. You can maintain friendships more easily because you don't take things personally or get pulled into unnecessary drama. Your relationships become more honest and intimate because you're not afraid of conflict or difficult conversations. When you know you can handle whatever emotions arise, you can address issues directly rather than avoiding them or handling them passive-aggressively. You become someone others feel safe being authentic around because they know you won't punish them for having feelings or expressing needs. In your personal growth, emotional mastery accelerates your development in every area because you can learn from any experience without being derailed by the discomfort of facing your limitations. You can receive feedback without becoming defensive. You can attempt challenging goals without being paralyzed by fear of failure. You can take risks without being controlled by anxiety about others' opinions. Most importantly, you can face your own shadow, the parts of yourself you don't like or want to acknowledge without being overwhelmed by shame or self-judgment. This radical self-acceptance paradoxically becomes the foundation for authentic change because you can see yourself clearly without the distortion of defensive reactions. The integration process requires understanding that emotional mastery is not a destination but a continuous practice. There will always be new triggers to discover, deeper levels of regulation to develop, and more sophisticated challenges that test your skills. The difference is that instead of being discouraged by ongoing growth opportunities, you become excited by them. Each new trigger becomes a chance to refine your skills. Each difficult person becomes a teacher offering you specialized training. This growth mindset transforms your entire relationship with challenge and difficulty. Instead of hoping for an easy life where nothing ever triggers you, you develop confidence that you can handle whatever life presents. You stop trying to control external circumstances and focus entirely on developing your internal capabilities. This shift from external control to internal mastery is the essence of true emotional freedom. The integration process also involves recognizing the ripple effects of your emotional mastery on everyone around you. When you stop being reactive, you give others permission to be less defensive. When you handle criticism gracefully, you model emotional maturity for your children, employees, and peers. When you stay calm during conflicts, you create space for real dialogue and resolution rather than just emotional venting. Your emotional mastery becomes a gift you offer to every relationship and situation you enter. You become a calming presence in chaotic environments, a voice of reason in emotional storms, and a source of stability in uncertain times. This influence doesn't come from trying to control or change others. It comes naturally from embodying the principles you've learned. The final aspect of integration is understanding that your personal emotional mastery contributes to the larger evolution of human consciousness. Every time you choose to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion, you're contributing to humanity's collective emotional intelligence. You're helping to create a world where people interact more consciously, resolve conflicts more skillfully, and treat each other with greater dignity and respect. This larger purpose gives meaning to all the effort you've invested in developing emotional regulation skills. You're not just working on yourself for personal benefit. You're modeling what's possible when human beings commit to growing beyond their automatic patterns and reactive impulses. You're proof that people can change, that emotional mastery is achievable, and that there's a better way to navigate the challenges of human relationships. Remember that integration is not about becoming perfect or never experiencing difficult emotions. It's about developing such skill at working with emotions that they serve your growth in relationships rather than controlling them. It's about becoming so comfortable with the full range of human experience that nothing can throw you off balance for long. When you reach this level of integration, you'll find that the very people who used to trigger you the most become some of your greatest sources of growth and even appreciation. Not because they've changed, but because your relationship to difficulty has transformed completely. You'll see clearly that every challenging person was actually a teacher in disguise. Every difficult situation was training for greater strength, and every trigger was an invitation to develop greater wisdom and compassion. This is the true reward of mastering your emotional triggers. Not just peace of mind, but the confidence and capability to engage fully with life. Knowing that whatever arises, you have the skills to handle it with grace. You become truly unshakable, not because nothing can disturb you, but because you know that even if something does disturb you, you have the tools to restore your center and learn from the experience. This unshockability becomes the foundation for a life of authentic power, meaningful contribution, and genuine freedom.